Yeah, I wasn't aware.
Right.
I was
We, I'll start my spiel again once we're on YouTube.
okay. Yeah, I should
Mm,
be in a second. Thanks,
mm,
thanks for letting me know.
mm.
Yeah. Okay, it should be up. It told me at least that we're up and running on YouTube. So welcome on YouTube.
Welcome. Yeah, welcome on YouTubers. We were just told that you were waiting, so sorry to keep you waiting. But hopefully you can all see us now. And I was just going into for the YouTubers, I was going into a short introduction to what we're going to do the next few days. We've called it a challenge, but it isn't really a challenge. It's more of an introduction to how Feldenkrais, the Feldenkrais method of movement re-education, can help riders to become more balanced, more stable, more coordinated, more aware, both mentally and physically, and more supple and flexible. And Thomas, Shana, and I have been working together for, I think, almost over six years now, coming up for
Wow.
7.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the reason that I asked Thomas and Shana if they were interested in Feldenkrais was I was looking at their stuff and some of their free challenges and courses they put out. And the way that Thomas and Shana train horses is remarkably similar to the way that I work with people. And so we thought it would be a great collaboration, and it's really proved to be so. Um, I'm Catherine McCrum, by the way, in case you hadn't realized. Hopefully my name's on the screen. So it's really great to have you here. And we're going to go into the first topic for day 1, which is balance and stability. And we're going to talk about why these matter and how one impacts the other and how you can't have one without the other. I will talk from the rider's perspective, and Thomas will talk from the horse and rider perspective combination. And of course, we'll have some time for some questions and discussions. So please, we've got a little Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can ask your questions in there, and then we'll absolutely guarantee to see them. Or you can ask them in the chat. A lot of people do that. That's absolutely fine. Also, in your course platform, if you've managed to register for the actual course, there is a first lesson, Feldenkrais lesson. And I really put this particular lesson up as a kind of diagnostic test of where your balance is today. You know, how do you experience your balance and your stability? So it's not a completely formal Feldenkrais movement lesson, but it would give you an idea of the type of approach it is. And if you have done it, you'll probably realize that this isn't really about strengthening and stretching. It's really more about how you organize your body to move in the most optimal, functional, and responsive way that you humanly can. Thomas, we had an idea to do a short sort of Feldenkrais lesson within the hour long itself. And so we can do that in a few minutes, but I didn't know there's something. Oh, yeah, because I wanted to ask you a little bit, Thomas, actually, because I was thinking about the whole idea of balance and stability, and how, for me, if you were going to have the dressage training scale, that these form the foundation, really, of a scale that I would have if I was going to make my own training scale. That if you don't have a sense of what balance is, what good balance is, and you don't really know and feel in yourself and in your horse how they are stable enough to be balanced, then you don't have a foundation. So I wonder what your thoughts were about that.
Yeah, that's a funny thing. In the training scale, there is no balance, right? And I don't understand why they left that out. The old
Mm.
masters in the 19th century, they all said that balance and suppleness are the cornerstones of dressage, and that's the foundation. And they all agree, the French authors, the German authors, the Austrian authors, they all agree it's all about balance and suppleness, right? And they're connected in a way, because if you're not balanced, you can't relax, right? Because you're busy not falling down. And it's the same with a horse. A horse that's not balanced will always brace somewhere, because otherwise he's fighting gravity, is essentially, right? And for the horse, balance is really a combination of keeping a steady tempo that's neither too fast nor too slow, and keeping his feet on a certain line of travel, which also means circles need to be round, straight lines need to be straight, no swerving, you know, and so on. And that's really the foundation. And in the training scale, you only have the steady tempo really as the bottom rung of the training pyramid, and then straightness comes much later, which I don't understand either. You know, because the putting your feet on the line and making your circles round and your straight lines straight, that's already the beginning of straightness in a sense. That's the foundation. So for me, that steady tempo and correct arena patterns, that's where it all starts, you know. And then if the horse can keep a relatively steady tempo and you know, execute relatively accurate arena patterns, then he finds his balance under the rider or at the lunge line, then he's able to relax, and then you get a decent rein contact, and then all the other things kind of follow from there. And for the rider, I guess you're in balance if you can take your legs off and take your hands off, and you don't fall off, you stay on, right? Then you're balanced. So at least as a starting point, you know.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that you often talk about, which is very relevant to riders as well, and just to human beings full stop, is can the horse balance over all four legs, all four feet, with equal ease? Because if they can't, then some directions they're going to be prone to going to, and other directions of travel and other ways of moving their body, they won't be able to do. And it's exactly the same for people. Most people will go, yeah, of course I can balance over my 2 feet. But probably almost everybody here will have one leg that they feel relatively more stable over, which means that over that leg, your stable leg, it's easier for you to move your center of mass over that stable leg. And it's harder for you to move your center of mass over the less stable leg. And when we're riding, even if that difference is subtle when you're standing on the ground, when you're riding, these differences really start to show up. And then people think that strengthening something is the answer. But it isn't really, because balance is all about your vestibular system, about your brain and your nervous system. And so just strengthening muscles where you consider that you've got some weakness won't necessarily inform your balance in any way, won't necessarily make you more stable, but for sure it'll make you tighter in muscles which are already a little bit tight.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that strength isn't important, and this is something we talk about a lot, but strengthening from an imbalanced place is not as useful as recovering and restoring the balance that all of us were more or less born with, if we were lucky enough to be born without a disability or a limitation. Will get you there, will get you strong in a way where you're unlikely to get injured, and you're going to be able to move in the best possible way for yourself and for your horse.
Yeah, very true. I mean, horses typically have more weight on one side of the body than the other. That's just a function of crookedness, right? And a lot of horses have one favorite front leg that they always rely on. And then if you try to shift the weight away from that front leg, maybe to the other side, they can get very defensive and panicky almost, because they either don't know that there are two more legs on the other side, or they don't trust it. They think these legs are going to break off if they put the weight on them. So it's, you know, so body awareness plays a huge role, that the horses understand that there is one leg at each corner of the body, and that they're all strong enough to support the weight. And it seems like it should be obvious to the horse, right? He's born with 4 legs. He's used his 4 legs all his life. But I found that a lot of horses are not really clear how many legs they have, or where they are, or whether they hold up if you put weight on them. So that's often where the training has to start, that you familiarize the horse with his own body. And of course, with us, it's the same. If you stand on 2 bathroom scales, 1 foot on each scale, you close your eyes and you put the same amount of weight on the scales, and then you open your eyes, you may be surprised that it's not exactly identical. It can be a big difference, right? Or you can rotate very easily one way, but not very easily in the other way, and then you wonder why my half pass is not very good in one direction, or my flying change is never clean in one direction. So, you know.
Yes, exactly. And actually that kind of comes into another really important thing for riders and for being able to move optimally, is your proprioception. So your awareness of the different parts of your body, how you sense them in relation to other parts. So every movement of my foot will ripple through my entire system, my entire body. And can you feel those connections? But also how each part of you relates to the space around you and to the surface you're standing or sitting on. And in the case of horses, that's an often unpredictable moving surface, which adds a whole lot more challenge, which again probably won't be overcome through just stretching and strengthening.
Right.
You need to work on your coordination. You need to work on your motor skills. You need to work on your proprioception, your ability to sense where you are in space. And that's a more subtle type of learning than lifting weights or doing lunges or planks or that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that was fascinating for me, from doing the Feldenkrais lessons, how everything is connected, and every change in one area of the body has repercussions throughout the entire body. And it's the same with riding too. If you change one body part of the horse, if you loosen something, then you can see a ripple effect that other parts loosen up. Or if one part gets stiff and tense, then other parts get stiff, maybe on the other end of the body. That's totally fascinating. That you can't isolate anything. Everything is always connected. There's always this pattern that involves the whole body. And writers often focus very much on what the head is doing or this and that, and they don't realize that this is just the end of a domino chain, and some domino piece fell over, and then maybe what you see is just the very end of that long line of dominoes, and then you have to go and find, where did that even start.
Yeah, and I think that's a really nice way of looking at it, because as you were talking about the focus on the horse's head, I had in my mind's eye this image of riders looking at their horse's head, which of course brings their head down. And at that point, when your head is down and your eyes are looking into such a small zone, you have no sense of what's going on behind you. And what's going on behind you is what Thomas has just referred to. There will be a whole kind of chain of forces traveling through from the hind legs up into the pelvis, through the spine, as the horse propels himself through space. But if you're focused on everything in front of you, you won't be able to feel that. So I think another thing riders need is eyes on the back of their head. Eyes in the front, eyes in the back, and probably eyes at the side too. I thought it might be fun to do like a really, really short kind of diagnostic balance and stability exercise, if you like. And because probably most of us are sitting on a chair or in that type of situation, I do apologize if you're in a car or somewhere where you can't find something to sit on, because it might make it a little bit less meaningful, but maybe you can imagine what this is like. So for this short movement session, all you need is a chair, which is sort of like a dining room chair, a firm chair, something which you can sit on and have your hips either above your knees or at the height of your knees, but not below, if preferable. If you're on a sofa or something soft, you'll have to make do. But yeah, we'll see what we manage. Thomas, can I just have your camera so you can see you, leave you on, and just have you so that I can see your torso at least, yeah?
Okay.
Yeah.
You can do that.
So everybody, you can find yourself something to sit on, and don't sit with good posture, sit as yourself. So if you're someone who loves to slouch and sit and lean on the back of your chair, just go for it. If you're someone who prefers to kind of perch, then perch. But wherever you are on your chair, whether you're leaning back or leaning forward, or you've got your legs crossed, or whatever you like, just get a sense of your places of stability, your foundations of stability. And these are the parts of you that are in contact with either the floor or the chair. So the floor, it'll be your feet, and the chair, it'll be your sitting bones, the very bottom of your pelvis. And notice in this first scan of yourself, do you notice whether you have a clearer sense of one foot than the other? Like you can feel the surface of one foot and its contact with the floor with more detail than the other. Some people will almost say that sometimes one side feels a little bit like it's sort of covered in cotton wool, and the other side will feel sharper and more defined. So see what that's like with your 2 feet. Maybe you feel your heels. Maybe you feel the 4 feet. Do you feel your toes, your 5 toes? Do you have a sense of your arches, the instep? You know, most of us will have one instep which is a little bit higher than other, a bit more lifted, and that will change the contact of that foot. And then sense your sitting bones, which are shaped a little bit by like rockers. So some people will be perched right in the middle of the rocker. Some will be a little bit in front of the rocker as if they were rocking a rocking chair forward. And other people will be a little bit behind the kind of center of balance, as if they were rocking a rocking chair backwards. And actually do that. Just sort of rock yourself a little bit forward, a little bit over what you feel is the middle right now, and a little bit behind. And as you do that, as you roll your point of contact, your place of stability forward and back, sense whether one sitting bone seems to be firmer and as if you have more weight in it than the other. And as you roll back and forth, so you can either do this by rounding your back and rolling your pelvis backwards, or you can tip and lean forward and back. Either is perfectly fine. But perhaps some people will kind of rock behind the right sitting bone, for instance, and then as they come forward, they'll rock forward towards the left sitting bone. So they're always inscribing a diagonal line, or the other side, the other diagonal. And do you breathe as you're observing yourself, as you're sensing yourself and observing yourself? And then take yourself to the front of your chair, if you're not there already, to a place where your legs have no contact with the chair. Find a nice kind of balanced width between your feet so you feel well supported. And very simply lift one sitting bone away from the chair and lower it. And do that several times and feel the weight of that, the ease. And then switch and compare that with the other side. And why did you choose that first side? Did you choose it because it was lighter and it was more available, even though you didn't know it on some level? Your system, your brain and your nervous system and your vestibular system, your balancing system knew that you could lift one sitting bone without even thought. And then leave that. And could you take yourself to the side of your chair so that one sitting bone is completely free of the chair? So you'll have one sitting bone perched on the chair, and you have to shuffle yourself all the way over. So you'll actually have to move your whole seat to the edge of the chair, if that makes sense. Yeah. So yeah, shuffle yourself right over. So one side of your bum is on the chair and the other side is off. And you may have to have your feet a little bit wider than you did before. The cats are coming in. So you've got one sitting bone completely off, one sitting bone on. So your points of support or stability are one sitting bone and 2 feet, and have your feet flat. And now a few times lift and lower the sitting bone that is off the chair, that is in the air and off the chair. And because you're perched on the side of the chair now, you should find that you can actually lower that free sitting bone a little bit below the sitting bone that's on the chair. So you lift the sitting bone that's free and you lower it, and notice what happens to the rest of yourself. What happens to your spine and your pelvis? How do you counterbalance in order not to fall over? If you did it as stiff as a board, it would be hard work. So some parts of you have to shift a little bit, either right or left. You've got to do something in your neck for your eyes to stay more or less on the horizon. Probably one foot sometimes takes a bit more weight. And then leave that, come back to the middle of your chair and observe, how do you experience your weight on your 4 points of support now? On your 2 sitting bones, on your 2 feet. Lift one sitting bone and then the other sitting bone, and notice if that's changed. Has the easy one got easier or more difficult? Or has the difficult one got more available? And then just leave it, balance in the middle, and I'm going to leave you with just one side done so that we can have a conversation about why we do things differently. Yeah, and as Elaine has already noticed, that despite the fact that we've only done one side, she feels more equal. So that's just a short way of getting in touch with your balance and how your balance is dependent on your ability to shift your weight over your foundation. And we'll carry on. How did you find it, Thomas?
Yeah, it was more even afterwards, and I could feel the right side, because I dropped the left side down, and then it was easier afterwards to lift the left seat bone. Initially, the right seat bone was easier to lift, and then the left seat bone was easier too, and I could feel a more solid contact on the right with my foot, but yeah, also with the seat bone. So yeah, it changed things a little bit.
Yeah, and it's like one of those things, often as you're preparing to ride and you wanted to do a little short kind of movement sequence like this is something you could do, and you don't have to do it 10 times on one side and 10 times on the other, because you're working, how your balance is determined by, as I said before, by your brain and your nervous system. It's not determined by doing equal number of repetitions of a movement. So sometimes just doing an asymmetrical movement will actually cause you to be more balanced and centered than trying to do the same number each side.
That's interesting for dressage rider, when you've been conditioned like to do everything equally on both sides, or this and that. So sometimes, or if you're conditioned to I don't know, practice the less coordinated side more, and then in Feldenkrais sometimes you say you can do the better side more, so to speak, and or go more to the pattern, like make the mistake worse or something. It's like, oh God, no, don't do that. For dressage.
I know it feels it's so sort of contradictory, doesn't it? I think what was interesting, if I may kind of refer to watching you, observing you do the movement, is that you also had different strategies for lifting each sitting bone. So I think on the right sitting bone, you very easily did a lateral bend in your spine.
Right.
And on the other side, you tended to tilt a little bit more.
That's true.
And I think it's because possibly that lateral bend in your spine is a little bit harder to find on your left side to your right. Is that right?
I think it's true.
And so once you observe and notice, oh, this is how I bend my spine to this direction, you can start to kind of transfer the learning, the kind of sensory learning, and see, can you find it on the other direction?
The rib cages anyways, something I wasn't aware of before we met you, because nobody talks about it in dressage. And I was actually earlier when you were talking, I was thinking how when I was young I was always obsessed with getting the right leg position, because all the good people I saw and that I admired all had a very distinct leg position with certain angles, and I wanted to have that, so I worked on that. And I think I probably made things harder for me by trying to work just on the legs and not the spine and the rib cage and other parts of the body. I think it would have gotten there faster if I had incorporated suppling exercises for the rib cage.
Because I remember you saying when we first started to work together that often as a rider and trainer, and having trained many hundreds of riders, that riders are aware of their legs some parts of their pelvis,
Mhm.
maybe a little bits of their spine, but not the whole spine, not the ribs at all, hands, maybe a little bit shoulders, but not so much in terms of just being told to kind of open the chest, but not normally about all the possibilities. And then he also said, which always used to make me laugh, that it wasn't often that people talked about the head and the neck and the eyes.
Yeah, never. Dressage never talk about the rib cage or the head or the or eyes or anything that's completely foreign to us.
Yeah. And yet, if your head is always a little bit committed to being side bent because you do something with one eye to bring that eye a little bit forward because this is your dominant eye, and then you're saying, it's just so hard. I can't weight my pelvis evenly at all. And it doesn't matter what I try. I still can't weight my pelvis evenly because you've never actually felt that what's going on up here is causing you not to be able to find that kind of more equal and even balance.
Yeah, a lot of riders have this permanent kind of tilted head position when they ride.
Yes.
So it's and of course that will have repercussions down the spine.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't mention this because it's just a short little demonstration of the type of work that we do. But if you actually put your hands on your ribs as you're doing the sit bone lifting lesson, you'll start to feel that as you lift one sitting bone, the ribs on that side will sort of close together almost like an accordion. And the other side, the ribs potentially sort of fan apart. And so often people go, oh, I've got a collapsed hip when I'm riding. And that's often because the ribs on that side are short and the other ones are constantly opened apart. And they can't understand why they can't, they try to get themselves straight so they're not falling in one direction. But because they can't feel this part of themselves, they can only maintain it for a few minutes before they forget about trying to keep themselves there and the ribs take over.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I feel like I've talked enough, and I see that quite a few people have got comments, so it'd be nice to hear from you guys.
Comments and questions. And we could start here with the Q&A.
Yeah, let's do that.
Section there. Elaine had asked early on if horses aren't sure whether they can trust their legs. Would you do in-hand work to correct that, or are there other methods you might use? Yeah, work in hand is really good. It's easier for the horse to figure things out when he doesn't have to support the rider, when he just has to deal with his own body. And you can go even like one step more basic in a sense and do the Feldenkrais exercises that Catherine and Charlotte have developed, right? Where it's not even work in that sense, but you're just showing the horse, very, very gentle, like oscillations, over the support base where they can rock millimeters to the left and the right and the front and the back and so on. That often puts the horse in touch with their feet. And it's not threatening, whereas work in hand can be a little threatening to some horses if they had bad experiences and then they get maybe a little scared or nervous, but with the Feldenkrais, it's just like cuddling essentially,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's a really, it's powerful. Looks like you're not doing anything, but it's really powerful kind of work to put horses in touch with their own feet.
Yeah, and when we first started working together, from my background in Feldenkrais for people, I often understood what Thomas was suggesting I try with my horse, but I didn't really have the riding skills to be able to do it, or the in-hand skills. But I did have the skill in my hands. So, that's why I developed the Feldenkrais, was that, he might say, well, you want to have a little bit of the ribs need to swing in a particular direction, and that makes space for a hind leg to be able to come through. And I was able to map that out with my hands. And funnily enough, my horse learned those patterns through my hands. And then when I could replace it, as I got more skilled, I could replace that with my leg or with my sitting bone. So my body became my hands, but I had to start with my hands first. Whereas a lot of people, who are better riders, learn how to do hands-on work afterwards. It was an interesting way around to do it. Yeah.
And Latina Reveal says, I'm curious to see how I can get more balanced after I recently had lower spine injury and pinched nerves, left leg numb, had spine injections last week and PT next week.
Yeah, so Latina, what I found is that Feldenkrais is great for rehab because you always work within the comfort and I'm going to say enjoyable range for the person. So therefore, you're not pushing your range beyond what your body can cope with. And that's really, really important after you've had an injury or any sort of surgery. The problems that I see most with people when they come to me after surgery is that they've been pushed to do too much too quickly, and they end up with a lot of pain and a lot of often nerve pain, overstretched tendons, a system that's overloaded with too much muscular effort too quickly. And, you know, surgery and injury has a big psychological and emotional component. And so if you work slowly within your range, within your comfort, within your pleasure, you will find you recover much, much faster than if you force things. And that is very much a part of the Feldenkrais methods, to learn to listen to yourself so that you become your best teacher for your body rather than the person who's either your physio or your, you know, exercise teacher, etc., etc.
I think the hands-on Feldenkrais lessons would be good for.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
Too.
Yeah, that's what I would normally suggest, a combination of hands-on lessons, which can really help get to some parts which have got, you know, after surgery, inevitably you're going to end up with scar tissue. After nerve injuries, you end up with like defensive patterns because it hurts so much that you learn how to avoid the pain, and you'll often do that through contorting yourself. And it can be quite hard to move out of that yourself, which is where some Feldenkrais hands-on lessons can be really, really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, Williamson said, I definitely had a different strategy for lifting either side of the seated exercises. That's something that may become more uniform over time, provided I do the exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of just observed that Thomas had 2 ways of doing this. There's probably 3 ways or 4 ways or any number of combinations. The more ways that you have available to lift your sitting bone, the more skilled you are as a mover. It's not to say that always side bending is the way to do it, or always tilting is the way to do it. It's knowing what you're doing and being able to do it with under your own control. That's what makes a skilled mover. And also moving in the way that's appropriate to the situation. Sometimes it might be totally appropriate to tilt your whole spine, but at other times you might want just a subtle side bend. Do you know the difference, and can you do it at will? Or even at a point without will, just because it's so available in the moment, you don't even have to think about it.
Yeah. Yeah, then Leslie Wolf, I think is a Pilates instructor, wants to know if there's a difference between Pilates and Feldenkrais.
Yes, there's a big difference. And maybe some of my answers just now may have traced out the difference. The first thing is that Pilates is a wonderful method. I worked as a Pilates instructor myself at a certain point. However, you are, as a student of Pilates, your instructor is generally telling you how to move correctly. And there's quite a lot of focus on strengthening weak muscles and stretching strong muscles. We don't really do that. We reorganize through paying attention to relationships between different parts of yourself within functional movement patterns. So the approach is very different. Yeah.
So then Toby Paul says, are sure foot pads any use in this work with the horse?
Oh, yeah. Go, Thomas. You were going to say something.
Yeah, I personally don't use them. My teachers didn't use them. Maybe I'm too old. They came after me, you know. But I've heard good things about them. So I don't have any first-hand experience with.
Yeah, so what I would say, Toby, is Wendy Murdoch was the first person really to develop, she developed surefoot pads. They are very much like physio pads, which a physio would use, and maybe that's where she got the idea from. Wendy Murdoch trained as a Feldenkrais practitioner, and I'm sure she had Feldenkrais in mind. What I like about them, because I found this very successful with horses, is that the surefoot pads kind of almost ask for the horse to oscillate. And we know that when either us or horses oscillate, it engages the deep postural muscles. And I think that's why you get good changes from them. So you get this really deep engagement of the the tonic postural muscles from the oscillations. They're called dynamic mobilizations in the physio world, but that's what surefoot pads do for you, so you don't have to do them on your horse. I don't use surefoot pads because my horse doesn't like them, and he likes me to do hands-on oscillations, so you can equally do them with your hands as on a surefoot pad.
Oh, cool. Yeah, Terry Todd is asking about differences and similarities between Feldenkrais and yoga.
I mean, it's kind of similar to my answer to Leslie. Obviously, the and yoga as well. There's so many different forms of yoga that I couldn't really say for sure. Well, Feldenkrais is like more like hatha yoga than it is like Ashtanga. So what I would say is there isn't a correct form or posture that you're aiming for. You're making small movement experiments so that you find for your own satisfaction what works better for you. And so that will be a continually developing process. Whereas with yoga and Pilates, there's generally a correct form that you're aiming for, as sort of excellence, if you like, within a movement. That isn't the focus in Feldenkrais, though you may end up moving excellently, if that makes sense. But you get there without an idea of what the end point is, which can be hard for people to get their heads around. So you don't necessarily have an idea of where you're going to get to, but then you get somewhere which is unexpected and feels better than you were before. And better sometimes than you could have imagined that you could move, or your posture is radically changed in that you've never actually kind of gone, I must correct my posture.
Yes. So Terry was also saying, I felt dropping the one seat bone must be kind of like when the horses cock their legs. And it could be, I mean, if they rest one hind leg, the pelvis drops on one side, right? And then the other one is higher. So they're a little uneven. And CC Golston says, I agree, I feel more equalized, but when I lift one seat bone at a time, the strong side is a bit stronger.
Yeah, and that you're inevitably, we've done what, 4 or 5 minutes of a few movements. So your strong side will, if you imagine that movement that you made on your strong side is like a really deep pathway in your brain. And then the other side, which is a bit less familiar, is like a little thread, a gossamer thread. Inevitably, it's going to take time for that new pathway to become as deeply grooved as your strong side. That's just the nature of how we learn.
Yeah, so Katie Wignall says, in attempting to lift my right seat bone when I sat at the edge of the chair, I think I was initially twisting instead of lifting it. Interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, most of us, it's very unusual to have such a pure movement of side bending, for instance, that there isn't any twist or any flexion or any extension. But you will get more and more aware of, oh, I'm twisting. And that is not what the movement was asking for. When I just lift it, I don't need that twist. So we're always looking to kind of get rid of the extraneous stuff that makes the movement more difficult. But that's through you being aware of it and noticing it and observing it, and me asking you questions to help you notice and observe. I won't ever come and step in and go, oh, look what you're doing. You're twisting, not lifting. I might feel like it sometimes, but I won't. No. These days, I don't feel like it even. When I first started, I definitely did. I came from the more formal exercise world where I was in charge.
Yeah, so Ricky says, more even feet for me after. Strange to notice that after the one side of the chair, I started the lifting with the other seat bone without thinking.
Maybe that's a little bit like the oscillation on the surefoot pad thing. You do something and then inevitably your nervous system just sort of balances you out. Don't know.
Carol Hosier says this was very powerful demo to stop after one side. Is that that idea of doing an asymmetrical movement also beneficial for the horse, like using shoulder fore, which can help straighten them?
It's interesting, Thomas. So we have talked about this, haven't we?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you can. I mean, I often recommend to the students to train a little asymmetrically, like if you do an exercise in both directions and one side is easier than the other, then maybe do the more difficult side a little bit more often. And afterwards, you should always go, I don't know, straight on a big circle or whole school to see if the horse feels any different than he did before the exercise. And then when you find that, yeah, if I do the exercise to the left, then he feels afterwards better than if I do it to the right, then maybe do the side more often.
Yeah.
That actually brings you a better result, you know. So as a rule of thumb, it's not totally, you know, religious, but to me that makes sense. So I practice the what's difficult a little bit more often, and then whatever gives you the bigger improvement, I would definitely do that a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed, you know, my horse traditionally is a little bit more what you call stiff on the left side and a little bit more bent, hollow on the right. I find if I'm out on the trail hacking, if I leg yield him to the left, but kind of do a semi half pass to the right, that frees him up really quickly so that he can do both in either direction. But I have to stick with what he can do easily at the start for the other side to and that's kind of similar to what we just did. Yeah.
Interesting. And then Ingela Shaw says definitely more equal after the exercise. However, one of my seat bones feels a bit more unstable.
Yeah, that'd be very common. Yeah. And sometimes people feel their seat bones are even different sizes or made of different material. Some say, oh, you know, one seat bone feels really hard and clunky and the other one feels a bit spongy. And then you imagine that in the saddle or on your horse, and I'm sure they must experience that too, those differences.
Yeah.
In us.
Yeah, and Terry says, yes, getting the lateral bend in my left side to lift the left side is much more difficult due to my scoliosis, but it moved. It's something I have to constantly do to have my pelvis move evenly. It's interesting how it affects the sternum.
Indeed. Yeah, because if I'm going to lift it's easier for me to lift my right sitting bone. And if I'm lifting my right sitting bone, my sternum easily slides to the left and the bottom of it tips a bit to the left and the top to the right. If I've got a scoliosis and then I'm trying to do the other side, it can be a little bit convoluted because the scoliosis will want to keep this relationship the same, but you're trying to go the other way. So often people do more in their neck as a result.
Yeah.
Don't know if that makes sense, Terry.
Then Bettina says, crazy, left bone high, I use the right foot. Right bone high, I use the foot also. Is that the reason why my pony goes better on the right rein?
Quite possibly.
Probably.
Yeah. And that if it's any comfort, Bettina, that is really common. You know, often whichever way someone is turning, like this or like this, they'll have the weight on the same sitting bone, whether they're turning to the left or turning to the right. They'll keep the weight on their familiar, stable side. Yeah. But once you notice it, you've got a chance to start changing it. And this is the big theme of Feldenkrais. If you know what you're doing, you can start to do what you want.
Yeah. So Antje Eichler says, where can I find the Feldenhorse lessons?
The majority of them are in the Top Line Makeover, which is our big work in hand course, lunging, work in hand, and etc. There are a few scattered in What, Why, How, and maybe some in Feldenfit. I can't remember where. Maybe a couple in Feldenfit, at least one or two. Yeah.
Yeah. And Lynn Howard said, could you describe how to do oscillations by hand?
Well, that would be Feldenhorse, and that's going to be, I think it's outside the remit of tonight's live. But how about I make a bargain with you? If you ask me the question in the Facebook group, I will map out for you a little bit. Just one movement you can try, okay?
Then Katharina Kitzmüller says, do you have a good Feldenkrais exercise for the rider's hands?
Probably yeah, we do. We do have quite a few in our Feldenfit program. We've got 4 different programs of 30 days of lessons. My favorite one is called The Surgeon's Hands. And this was a lesson that Moshe Feldenkrais, the man who developed the method, taught to a group of apprentice surgeons or house, here we call them, what do we call them? Registrars. because he noticed the surgeon himself had the most beautiful use of his hands, and the junior doctors were like rough, like that. So yeah, the surgeon's hands, that's one I like.
Yeah. And Alia Kanepa says, I couldn't lift either seat bone at first without lifting my foot. When I felt able to lift both sides relatively evenly, I was able to isolate a lower right lumbar tightness and stretch it with the lift. I kept shifting back and forth until the pain lessened. Cool.
Yeah, and you know, Alia or Alia, sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. So often moving out of pain and finding some variety in how you're moving can really, really help with that type of situation. You know, moving in surprising and unpredictable ways that your body isn't used to can often take you out of a painful situation.
And Jamie Cotney is also interested in Feldenkrais. She's rehabbing a horse with a broken pelvis. His SI joints needed adjustment. Are there Feldenkrais exercises for the SI joints?
This is a question that came up last week, wasn't it? But about for people. I don't work in terms of isolating. Oh, I think you asked the question, Jamie. I asked this. Yeah. I don't work in terms of isolation of a particular part. What I look at is the whole system and the whole body, and can I clarify the relationships which are missing? So almost like if a horse or a person has a possible repertoire of music pieces that they potentially could play, which pieces in their repertoire are missing, and can I fill those in? And so I would say to you is do lots of different movements which ask you to move your right and your left and explore that front and back, rounding and arching. Unusual movements in lying, sitting, standing, kneeling. And for your horse, think the same thing. If you always do the same thing with your horse and you just ride circles all the time on one rein and then the other, probably the SI won't ever get any better. But if you do Thomas's exercises, which are hugely varied, then it's likely his SI will get better. That's what I'd say. Variety is the key.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And Laura Gavronsky says, so the old saying, no pain, no gain is not okay?
Not in my world. Yeah, no pain, no gain. Look, if I like to ski tour. If you know what that is, it's when you walk up a mountain and then you ski down. And I'm not saying that it isn't actually quite painful walking up a mountain, but there's a purpose to it because I'm getting to the really good skiing. In working with your body, like this, no. I would say almost more pain, less gain. More will, less skill. Those sort of things. Yeah. Or less will and more skill, maybe would be a better way to put it. So reduce the effort. Because if you are making an effort and you're losing a lot of muscular contraction, your ability to feel is greatly diminished because your muscles sort of obstruct your sensory perception.
Yeah. So Jerry Ostendorf says, no one has ever taught me just exactly how to weight the seat to get the horse to move over to the weighted side. I find it easiest to weight the stirrup, thus pressing down with that hip buttock, but that can't be right.
Thomas, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, actually, for me, it's a whole body movement. It's not just pressing down on one seat bone or one stirrup, but for me, it's a little bit of a lateral swing of the pelvis, usually with a little bit of a rotation that puts more weight on my seat bone, but also that movement of the pelvis to one side gets transmitted to the femur, right? And then that femur gives a little nudge and the other femur becomes a little lighter. And then the femur transmits the movement to the lower leg. So it's this chain, of movements that Catherine often talks about, and that comes up in all the Feldenkrais exercises. Like you move one part of the body, and then Catherine always asks, so can you feel how that then gets transmitted in each direction, whatever is available, wherever you start, right? So from your pelvis, if you move over, then you can observe how does that affect your lumbar spine, your rib cage, your shoulders, your head. If you move your center of your body one way, what does that do to your torso? And what does it do to your legs? And so if you move your whole body a little over, then the horse almost has no choice but to go with you.
Yeah, and actually, as you were doing that, Thomas, it was so nice because I can't see your pelvis, but what I can imagine, and maybe this will help you, Jerry, is that Thomas was moving his pelvis a little bit like a pendulum, which is not so dissimilar to the little movement sequence I taught you earlier, except that we slowed it right down, so you may not have felt very pendulum-like, but that little ability to shift a bit of weight, swing your pelvis like a pendulum a little bit and just find just the right amount of adjustment above, that you don't move your center of mass too far outside your base of support, because then you disturb the horse's balance and you will potentially be at sort of risk of falling over.
Yeah, timing plays a role too.
Yeah.
There are moments when this lateral sort of swing and rotation is easy because it matches the horse's movement, and then there are moments when it goes against the horse's movement. So you have to feel the moment when the horse's body is moving in that direction. So when the rib cage is swinging that way, that's the moment when the inside hind leg lifts up, the rib cage swings a little to the outside, and then you could take the horse with your seat and your weight towards the outside, right? Or if you want to move towards the inside, then you have to watch when the rib cage swings to the inside and the outside hind leg lifts up. But if you're sitting in balance, you'll feel it. The movement of the horse gets transmitted to your pelvis and thighs and lower legs and so on. If you just go with these lateral, little oscillations of the horse's rib cage, then you can amplify them in one direction. It doesn't work to go against the horse and force and push, but you kind of have to find that groove of the swinging of the horse, and then you can increase one direction or maybe decrease one direction. If the horse swings too far over there, maybe you can tell him, okay, that's enough. Don't go any farther than this, and then come back in the other direction. So that plays a big role too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so let's see here. Jane says, yes, I agree. I had to learn not to ouch myself too much a little bit at a time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Small bits done with awareness and attention and your breathing coming and going. It's a great sign. If you notice you're holding your breath, you're probably working too hard. Yeah. Unless you're climbing the mountain, well, then you're working your breath. Don't hold your breath climbing a mountain.
And Harriet says, love that, work within your pleasure. This is why I can keep to Feldenkrais, whereas a lot of methods I drop very quickly. Also, the Feldenkrais courses I've done here have been amazing for my nervous system and it helps my ADHD hugely.
That's great. It's really nice. I'm happy for you, actually. And I know that many people who have found that Feldenkrais and the way that we work has been tremendously helpful for both, for things like anxiety and depression as well. So I'm glad it's affected you positively.
Yeah. And then Ingela says, excellently said. You become the best teacher for your body rather than the instructor. We are so many who are tuned into being the good pupil, so we overdo all the time. I find Feldenkrais so good because you're taught to listen to your own body.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, I always get into trouble when I don't listen to my own body. Or what my horse is telling me, and I listen too much to somebody else who's telling me what's good for me. Sometimes I need to hear that, but often actually my own intuition and felt sense is more accurate than someone on the outside. And I've learned to trust that through a lot of this type of work. Yeah.
And Jamie says, I have used Surefoot pads for rehabbing my horse with broken pelvis, have really helped. I stand on them too. They also stimulate parasympathetic nervous system in horse, but not human.
Oh, I didn't know that. No, that's interesting about the parasympathetic. Didn't know that. For those who don't know, the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system are, well, the parasympathetic is the more relaxed state and the sympathetic is the more fight and flight state. And you want to kind of have a balance between the two. You don't want to be so far in the parasympathetic that you couldn't run away from the tiger if it came, and vice versa.
Yeah. Gil Spells also likes the surefoot pads.
Yeah, they're great, I think. I agree. I just wish my horse liked them, but he just doesn't. I was like, come on, come on.
And then Jamie says, I was very good at doing Pilates and yoga, balancing in very poor
Oh
alignment.
yeah. I mean, I absolutely. It's incredible what you can do in your own particular favorite posture.
Yeah. Terry Todd says using gym mats also has been an incredible way to open up proprioception in our horses and humans.
Yeah. I mean, the gym mats, again, they've got that little spongy thing going on. So yeah, it's a
Yeah.
similar thing. And they're bigger, so they might be easier to persuade your horse to try out.
Yeah. Maria Bloman says it was interesting to feel how my rib cage contracted and fanned out when I lowered and lifted the seat bone. Before I started Feldenkrais, I would not have observed that connection.
And actually, Maria, I remember a video of you riding your horse, and I think it was to do with your ribs, and you found your ribs, and you were able to yield your horse in both directions. And I think you were saying it's like the first time I've been able to find both directions. I may have slightly, fluffed that, but that's what I remember. I remember seeing a video of you just like really easily, your horse was just going, and you looked like you were doing nothing.
Right.
I went, oh, she's found her ribs.
Yeah. Jane says, after doing your exercise, my stronger side has changed. My weaker side has become stronger. My other side is weaker now.
Yeah.
So it seems like they've evened out a little bit. Huh?
Indeed. We aim to confuse.
Yeah, exactly. Confusion is good because it
It
means
is, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. It keeps you in that state of experimentation, I think.
Yeah. Karen Johnson says, how much can this help with severe scoliosis since there are structural issues that limit change?
What I would say from working with people who have severe structural scoliosis is that you can find the parts of you that are available to move, so you can always improve your movement potential. But I would not say that, of course, we can't, change that sort of scoliosis, but you may find that you're less in the grip of it, if that makes sense, because you have more places available to you to help you move in the directions that you want to go and in the way that you want to. So it should improve your quality of movement and your ability to move with ease within the context of what the injury or condition that you have.
Yeah, so Jerry says, thank you. So if I understand right, for movement to the left, it is more of a gentle push with the right hip as the horse's left rib cage is expanded, right rear coming forward, correct? So not consciously weighting the left seat in this case. Now I see why it's rarely taught. If I try to just bear down on one seat bone, it makes me rigid somehow. For me, I find that the lateral swing is more natural, goes more with the horse's movement, and it moves the weight over. I mean, if you stand on the ground with both feet and you swing your pelvis to the left, your left foot has to take more weight, right? It's not possible. And you could lift your right foot up even. But you couldn't lift your left foot. If your pelvis is over your left foot, you couldn't lift the left foot, you'd fall down, right? And you can, and that's essentially what happens to the horse too, just by moving your whole pelvis a little to one side, your weight shifts. And of course that goes right through the horse's body, and the horse feels that, and they tend to mirror that. They tend to go with us, especially if your leg on the other side says, come on, I'm going over there, let's go with me, that kind of thing. And you may have to make a little space for the rib cage and the horse to move where you want to go. If you clamp that left leg on when you want to go left, then where's the horse going to go, right? That's sometimes a point of confusion for the horse. Like the rider is asking something but not allowing it. So if you want to take the horse this way, then maybe that leg has to become a little bit lighter, and this leg can give a little nudge and say, come on, go with me, stay underneath me,
Yeah, I mean, Jerry, that does sound kind of what you're suggesting. Just think, you just think of it always moving. And Thomas, you were showing it so beautifully. I could imagine the horse swinging their belly underneath you then, because you had that timing of like the belly swings from left to right, from left to right. And you're swinging your pelvis and you're encouraging with that leg, and you're making space with this leg so the horse can move into it. And it's all done in a rhythm which is congruent for the horse and pleasant for them.
Yeah. So for me, the idea is that I join the horse's movement and I follow along, and then I influence it from the inside out. So instead of just applying pressure from the outside in, I'm trying to just modify the movement, the natural movement. So if the horse's body, rib cage swings to the left, maybe I'll ask the horse to swing a little bit farther to the left. But if the horse's rib cage is swinging to the right, and then you tell the horse now swing to the left, and you're working against the natural movement, and then it's like a head-on collision a little bit between cars. And that usually doesn't go well.
Exactly. And that, for those who wanted to know about the hands-on Feldman horse work, that's exactly how I work. I listen for the horse's movement that they're offering, and I go with it, and maybe sometimes exaggerate it a bit.
Yeah.
I think we've got a commitment to keep this to about an hour, Thomas.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. So we've already gone a little bit over, but we started a bit late.
Yeah. Yeah, Maria was saying you obviously only have a small window for that swinging movement. Yep, that's true.
You do. Yeah.
Yeah, but you're right. Maybe we should wrap it up.
Yeah. And then we've got two more. So tomorrow we're going to be talking about suppleness and flexibility. And you probably noticed that whether we're talking about balance and stability or suppleness and flexibility, we're talking about all of it all the time, because these principles are inseparable.
Yeah, true.
So for those who haven't done the day one lesson, hop onto the course platform and try it out. I'll release the day two lesson tonight so that it's available for first thing in the morning for people in Europe. It'll be available first thing in the morning for people in Australia. And those in America, you're kind of lagging behind us, but it'll be there. Great to meet you all and to see new faces here. It's lovely. And go to the Facebook group. Bring your discussions, your questions, your feedback. It's all part of, the enjoyment of doing these things for us as well. And tag us in there too.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, take care, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Catherine.